All right, strap in, everybody. We're going deep on this one. Ted Bundy, a name that, well, it sends chills down your spine.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're trying to really get into it. Like, how did this guy, this seemingly normal guy, how did he terrorize an entire region, the Pacific Northwest, for so long? You know, leaving behind just a trail of victims and fear.
Right.
And we're looking at the 1970s here. Young women are disappearing. Authorities are, well, they're scrambling, right? Trying to figure out who's doing this. But the killer's profile, well, let's just say it's not your typical suspect.
Not at all.
We've got a YouTube video here from the infographic show. It's called How They Caught Serial Killer Ted Bundy.
Okay.
And here's the thing that really gets me, is that Bundy, he didn't fit this, like, image of a monster, you know, hiding in the shadows.
Right.
This guy was charismatic, educated, and get this, he worked in crime prevention.
It's a real head scratcher. You know, when you think about it, that contrast between this outward persona, this charm that Bundy had, and then the sheer brutality of what he was doing. It's chilling.
It is. It's like a total disconnect.
Yeah, and that's really at the heart of why he was able to evade capture for so long. He was almost weaponizing his charm to disarm his victims.
It's almost too clever, in a way.
It is, and the infographic show video, it does a good job of laying out his early MO, you know, his modus operandi. He would often fake injuries, sometimes he'd be on crutches, other times he'd have a sling. He drove this seemingly harmless VW Beetle.
Right.
And he would really prey on people's, you know, good nature, their willingness to help, especially in public spaces.
So he was taking, like, basic human decency, like helpfulness,
right,
and turning it into a weapon.
Absolutely.
That's just disturbing.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they had, like, descriptions of him, his car, were there any, like, early chances? Could they have stopped him sooner?
You would think so. You really would. But the truth is, there were several missed opportunities early on in the investigation.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You had multiple witnesses reporting a man, you know, fitting Bundy's description, the sling, the beetle, the whole 9 yards. Some even named him Ted.
They had his name.
They did.
Are you serious?
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
I mean, how many Teds driving around in VW Beetles with a sling could there be?
Right. It really makes you question how effective the police work was back then.
Yeah. I mean, that's almost impossible, it seems like.
Well, it speaks to the limitations of criminal profiling at the time. I mean, Bundy just didn't fit that image of your stereotypical serial killer.
Right. He was clean-cut, well-spoken.
Exactly. He appeared harmless, and tragically, as his body count grew, so did his audacity. He expanded his hunting grounds. He was exploiting gaps in communication between different law enforcement agencies.
So it sounds like he was learning as he went along, and using that knowledge to stay ahead of the police.
You got it. It was like a real-life, twisted version of Catch Me If You Can, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. It's pretty scary. And you're right. I mean, he was definitely using his understanding of law enforcement.
Right.
Probably from his work, his crime prevention work, to stay ahead of the curve.
Right. It's a fascinating aspect of this case, because it wasn't a brilliant detective or some groundbreaking forensic discovery. That led to his downfall.
Okay, so if it wasn't the police who cracked the case.
It was someone much closer to him than anyone suspected, his longtime girlfriend, Elizabeth Klupfer.
Wow.
She started noticing these unsettling parallels between Bundy's behavior and the descriptions of the suspect.
Oh, wow.
She saw through his facade. She trusted her gut, and she reported her suspicions to the police.
Man, that must have taken, I can't imagine the courage that took to suspect your own partner of something so horrific.
It's incredible, and it underscores the importance of trusting your instincts, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely. So did her tip, I mean, did it lead to his immediate arrest?
It was a turning point, a huge turning point. The police searched Bundy's car, and they found incriminating evidence: a crowbar, handcuffs, rope.
Oh, wow.
But even with those discoveries, they couldn't definitively link him to the murders at that time.
Seriously.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
It's like he was constantly slipping through their fingers.
Yeah.
So how did they finally get enough to put him behind bars?
Well, the case took another dramatic turn. During his first trial, Bundy, in a brazen act of defiance, he escaped from custody.
What? He escaped?
He jumped out of a library window.
No way.
And managed to evade capture for days.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is incredible in itself.
Yeah.
Here's the even crazier part.
Okay.
He didn't just hide. he continued his killing spree
Wow.
while on the run.
This is insane. He escaped, and he kept committing crimes.
It's like he was relishing the cat and mouse game with the authorities.
He must have been so arrogant to think he could just keep getting away with it.
His ego, his need for control, it was definitely at play. But, as we'll see in part 2, this reckless confidence would ultimately lead to his downfall in Florida, where his crimes took an even darker and more desperate turn. Welcome back. Before we get into this final chapter of Bundy's story, I think it's important to try and wrap our heads around, what drove this seemingly ordinary man to commit such horrific acts. Like what made Ted Bundy tick? What turned him into this monster?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that keeps coming up for me too, right? Like, was he just born evil? Or was it like a series of events, something in his past that twisted him into this?
Right, and it's a question that's fascinated and baffled experts for decades. And while there's no easy answer, I think exploring Bundy's psychological profile, it can give us some insights.
Okay.
One of the most striking things when you look at Bundy's early life is the deception surrounding his parentage.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up believing his mother was his sister.
Oh, wow.
And only discovered the truth later on. And that kind of profound betrayal, coupled with a reportedly abusive grandfather, likely created this breeding ground for shame, insecurity, and a really distorted view of relationships.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot for a young mind to process, to have your whole identity shaken like that.
Absolutely.
I could see how that would have a lasting impact.
And these early traumas, they may have played a role in his need for control and his warped perception of women.
Right.
As he got older, he developed this disturbing fascination with voyeurism and violent pornography, which suggests, a growing darkness within him. It's a pattern we see in a lot of violent offenders, this gradual descent into increasingly deviant fantasies.
So the seeds were planted early on, but what was the catalyst? What actually triggered that transition from fantasy to murderous reality?
Well, experts believe that Bundy's first murder might have been sparked by a particularly painful romantic rejection. He was reportedly infatuated with this young woman, who ended their relationship rather abruptly. And this rejection, in his twisted mind, it could have ignited a desire for revenge, for asserting a control he felt was slipping away.
So like a broken heart, a bruised ego, and suddenly he becomes this cold-blooded killer.
Right.
That's terrifying. I mean, how do you even begin to wrap your head around that kind of disconnect?
It's the chilling nature of psychopathy, right? Yeah. This profound lack of empathy, coupled with this inflated sense of self-importance.
Right.
And what's even more disturbing is that, Bundy's crimes, they seem to escalate over time. The level of brutality, the ritualistic elements he incorporated, it's as if he was feeding a growing appetite for darkness.
You mentioned rituals. Can you elaborate on that? What exactly did he do?
Well, this is where it gets really unsettling. Bundy would often return to the sites where he'd disposed of his victims' bodies.
Oh, God.
And sometimes he would wash and dress them, even apply makeup. It's almost as if he was trying to preserve them, to create this macabre tableau that he could revisit, this twisted attempt to maintain a connection, even in death.
That is so creepy. It's like he was trying to create his own, sick fantasy world with these victims.
Right.
I remember reading that he also took photographs.
He did. He wanted to capture those moments, relive them later. And this compulsion, it speaks volumes about his need for control, his desire to possess and to dominate. He wasn't just taking lives. He was trying to steal their identities, erase their individuality, and replace it with his own twisted vision.
That level of depravity it's just hard to fathom. I mean, it makes you wonder if there was any part of him that recognized the horror of what he was doing. Did he ever show remorse?
That's a point of much debate.
Okay.
While Bundy eventually confessed to his crimes, some believe he did so more out of a desire to manipulate the narrative, to control the story, even from behind bars, rather than out of genuine remorse.
Wow.
It's possible that he was incapable of true empathy, locked in this narcissistic bubble where his needs and his desires were paramount.
So even in his confessions, he was playing a game. It's like he couldn't let go of that control he had over his victims, even in death.
It all goes back to that psychopathic need to dominate.
Right.
That chilling lack of empathy, that cold-blooded calculation. That's what makes Bundy such an enduringly disturbing figure. Even decades later, His case continues to fascinate and horrify us. It forces us to confront the dark side of human nature and the unsettling reality that monsters can hide in plain sight, sometimes behind the most charming of facades.
And in Bundy's case, that facade was so convincing that he managed to escape from custody, not once, but twice.
You're right. And as we head into the final part of our deep dive, we'll delve into that second escape, his final rampage in Florida, and the events that ultimately led to his capture.
Okay, we're back. And I gotta say, this whole deep dive into Ted Bundy, it's been a wild ride for sure. We've gone through his crimes, we've kind of dug into his psychology, and explored how he used his charm basically as like a weapon.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the bigger picture. How did Bundy's case, like, change the way we view crime, investigation, and even just our perception of evil?
Well, I think Bundy's impact on law enforcement and society in general, it's undeniable. His case, it wasn't just some horrifying anomaly. It really forced this paradigm shift in how we understand and approach serial killers. One of the most significant changes, I think, was this shattering of that stereotypical image of a serial killer.
Yeah.
Before Bundy, the common perception, it was often, a disheveled, socially awkward loner. But Bundy, with his charisma, his intelligence, and his seemingly normal life, he completely upended that assumption.
Yeah, it's almost like he exposed a blind spot
Right.
in our collective understanding of evil.
Ex-
We had this, like, preconceived notion of what a monster should look like.
right.
And Bundy, he just didn't fit the mold.
Exactly. And this realization, it forced law enforcement to move beyond that superficial profiling and really delve deeper, into the psychology of these predators.
Okay.
Bundy's case, it highlighted the importance of understanding the motivations, the modus operandi, the intricate details of their crimes, and it really pushed agencies to develop these more sophisticated methods of investigation, including, the use of databases and improved communication between jurisdictions, which, as we saw, were really lacking during Bundy's early sprees.
Right. So in a way, it's kind of a twisted irony that Bundy actually inadvertently helped to improve the very systems he was exploiting.
Absolutely. His case also underscored this crucial role of forensic science, in linking criminals to their crimes.
Right.
The analysis of, hair fibers, bite marks, fingerprints, and other trace evidence, it became increasingly important, in building a case against him. Before Bundy, these techniques, they weren't as widely used or
Okay.
understood.
And let's not forget the impact on society
Right.
as a whole. I mean, the idea of a boogeyman, it suddenly took on this very real and terrifying form. It wasn't some shadowy figure in the night. It was a handsome, well-spoken law student
Right.
who could be lurking anywhere.
Exactly. Bundy's case, it amplified the fear, especially among young women, leading to this increased vigilance, a surge in self-defense classes, and this heightened awareness of personal safety. He changed the way we thought about risk, trust,
Yeah.
vulnerability in our everyday lives.
It's a legacy that continues to this day. We see it in the popularity of true crime documentaries, the countless books and articles, the ongoing fascination with this case. Why do you think Bundy continues to captivate and horrify us,
Yeah.
even decades later?
I think it's because Bundy, he represents something deeply unsettling about human nature. He embodies the idea that darkness can lurk beneath the surface, that even those who appear, normal, charming, trustworthy can harbor monstrous secrets. He forces us to confront this uncomfortable reality that evil, it isn't always easy to identify. And it can strike when we least expect it.
It's a sobering reminder that we can't be complacent.
Right.
We have to be aware of our surroundings,
Yeah.
trust our instincts,
Yeah.
and never dismiss those nagging feelings of unease.
Yeah.
But on a more personal level, what stands out to you about this case? What's the one thing that you'll take away from this deep dive?
For me, it's the courage of the women who survived Bundy's attacks and those who, like Elizabeth Klopfer, dared to speak out against him. Despite the fear and the disbelief they faced, their stories, they remind us that even in the face of unimaginable evil, there's strength, there's resilience, and there's the power of speaking truth to power.
That's a powerful message to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but this is far from the end of the story. Ted Bundy's case, as horrifying as it is, it offers these valuable lessons that continue to shape our understanding of criminal behavior and the importance of vigilance, both individually and as a society. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and never underestimate the power of speaking up.